The sound of heels clicking on the polished floor echoed through the courtroom as Michael Jordan, the legendary basketball player turned business mogul, walked into the San Francisco Federal Building. No lawyer at his side, no suit filled with legal experts. Just the same man who had captured the world's attention on basketball courts, now preparing for an entirely different game. Judge Beatrice Thornwald, with over 30 years of experience on the bench, was about to face a challenge unlike any she had encountered. But when she saw Michael Jordan standing before her, clutching a stack of disorganized papers, she couldn't help but laugh. She had seen it all. Entitled tech moguls, crooked politicians, and smooth-talking celebrities. But a multi-millionaire walking into court, attempting to defend himself in a patent case, this was new, and to her it was almost laughable. Little did she know, this was the beginning of a legal showdown that would lead to a misjudged beginning. The overconfidence of the court. When Michael Jordan walked into Judge Beatrice Thornwald's courtroom without a lawyer, the air in the room shifted. It wasn't the usual spectacle of a high-profile case. No polished legal team, no elaborate defense strategies. Just Michael Jordan, the basketball legend who had conquered courts around the world, now facing a courtroom battle for his innovative energy storage technology. For Judge Thornwald, who had spent over 3 decades overseeing legal disputes in a wide range of high-stakes cases, this was unexpected. She had seen tech moguls, celebrities, and politicians all attempt to play the courtroom game, but none quite like this. None had ever come in with so little preparation. None had dared to represent themselves in such a critical case. A rich and famous man who didn't even bother with a lawyer? It was absurd. She couldn't help but let out a small, involuntary laugh as she glanced at the disheveled papers in Jordan's hands. The gallery, too, was amused. They had expected a traditional legal battle, but instead they saw a man who seemed unprepared and out of place in the legal world. It wasn't just that Jordan was representing himself, it was the way he did it. There was no arrogance, no sharp business acumen showing through. There was only an air of confusion and lack of proper legal preparedness, the kind that Judge Thornwald had seen countless times before. She had seen wealth and power work in strange ways, but never in this form. The case at hand was a serious one. Magnatech Industries, a giant in the tech world, had accused Jordan's company of stealing a revolutionary battery design. It was a battle that could cost Jordan millions, perhaps even his reputation. And yet, as he stood before the judge, unpolished and seemingly unprepared, it seemed almost laughable. How could someone of his stature, someone who had built an empire from the ground up, be so careless? Judge Thornwald's sharp eyes scanned the room. She had dealt with enough arrogant millionaires who thought the courtroom was just another arena to show off their power. But this was something different. This was the moment where she believed the game would be simple. She wasn't even bothered by his approach, for she assumed that Jordan was just another rich man who didn't understand how to navigate the legal system. Little did she know, the game she was about to play would be one she never expected. As the trial began, with Magnatech's lawyer, Dominic Reeves, confidently presenting their case, Jordan's demeanor remained unchanged. He shuffled through his papers, looking disorganized, his voice barely audible as he began his defense. The courtroom erupted in muffled chuckles as Jordan's opening statement faltered. It seemed like everything was working in Magnatech's favor. But Judge Thornwald, despite her initial amusement, could not shake the sense that something deeper was going on. What appeared to be fumbling on Jordan's part could, in reality, be a deeper strategy. A strategy that no one, especially her, could see coming. In the end, she would learn that her initial judgment was wrong. The court might have laughed at Jordan in the beginning, but what came next would turn that laughter into astonishment. What appeared to be a reckless misstep would soon reveal itself as a brilliant trap, set with precision, and Judge Thornwald would be the first to realize she had underestimated Michael Jordan, the man who had mastered more than just basketball. The courtroom laughs, but Jordan isn't laughing. The quiet mastery of patience. As Michael Jordan's case unfolded in Judge Thornwald's courtroom, the laughter grew louder. Every misstep, every disorganized shuffle of papers seemed to confirm what the courtroom had already assumed. This was a spectacle, a high-profile distraction, not a serious legal defense. To everyone in the room, it appeared that Jordan, the basketball legend turned businessman, was out of his depth. And yet, as the mockery swirled around him, Jordan remained calm, perhaps too calm. While Magnatech's attorney, Dominic Reeves, presented their evidence with sleek slides and polished rhetoric, Jordan barely responded. He wasn't frantic, as many might expect of a man facing millions in damages. He wasn't angry, nor was he overwhelmed. He sat quietly taking notes, his eyes following the presentation with unnerving focus. It was almost as though he wasn't even part of the courtroom, but rather an observer, detached, as if he were a spectator watching his own fate unfold. For Judge Thornwald, it was becoming increasingly frustrating. She had seen rich, powerful people attempt to manipulate the courtroom with grand gestures or sharp suits, but never with this level of detachment. Jordan's behavior wasn't one of arrogance. It was one of patience, of calculated silence. It was as though he was waiting for something, biding his time like a chess master watching his opponent move the pieces around the board. The more Reeves spoke, the more Jordan seemed unfazed. The evidence Magnatech presented was damning. The patents, the designs, the clear timeline of events. It painted a clear picture that Jordan's company had stolen the revolutionary battery design from Magnatech. But as the facts mounted, Jordan only grew more still. His hands, though they appeared to be trembling slightly, never shook with panic. His eyes remained focused, not on the details of the case, but on something bigger, something the judge could not yet see. At one point, as the court buzzed with excitement over the overwhelming evidence, Jordan's gaze fixed on a distant point in the room. He wasn't looking at the jury, the witnesses, or even Judge Thornwald. His focus was somewhere else, a place in his mind where strategies were being formed, plans were being laid. The courtroom seemed to fade into the background as Jordan seemed to retreat into his own thoughts, silently calculating his next move. Judge Thornwald, irritated by Jordan's apparent lack of attention, finally snapped, "Mr. Jordan, are you with us? Do you understand the case that's being presented?" Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Jordan blinked, as if waking from a trance. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice quiet but measured. "I'm just considering the testimony." It wasn't defiance or disrespect. It was a statement of quiet confidence. He wasn't reacting to the immediate pressure of the case. He was weighing it, absorbing it, allowing the evidence to unfold as he prepared for what was to come. And in that moment, Jordan's indifference seemed more like mastery than ignorance. The gallery, still laughing at his unorthodox approach, didn't understand the depths of his strategy. Neither did Judge Thornwald, who had seen her share of defiant millionaires, but none who had mastered the art of silence and patience so completely. Jordan wasn't just trying to survive this legal battle, he was playing a deeper game. He was waiting for Magnatech to make their move, for their confidence to blind them to the possibility that they had underestimated him. While Magnatech's case appeared airtight, while their lawyers' slick presentation and the expertly orchestrated witnesses seemed to hold all the answers, Jordan's calmness stood in stark contrast to the chaos surrounding him. He was letting them think they had won, letting them build their case to the fullest extent. But underneath that quiet exterior, Jordan was calculating, and the trap he had set was about to spring. And so, while the courtroom laughed at him, Jordan wasn't laughing. He was quietly watching, silently learning, and preparing for the right moment to strike. When it came, it would come swiftly, and it would leave them stunned. What appeared to be a lack of preparation was in fact a display of brilliant patience, a patience that would soon turn the tide in his favor. The calm before the storm, a quiet mind concealing a brilliant strategy. Michael Jordan's seeming indifference in the courtroom only grew more pronounced as the trial continued. Where others might have felt the pressure mounting, especially under the glare of Judge Thornwald's skepticism and Magnatech's seemingly ironclad case, Jordan remained eerily still. To the untrained eye, his posture appeared to be one of defeat. But to anyone who truly understood the art of strategy, Jordan's silence was not a sign of surrender. It was the calm before the storm. Judge Thornwald, a woman with decades of experience on the bench, had learned long ago to spot the signals of panic, arrogance, and confidence in the courtroom. And yet, with Jordan there was something entirely different. While his behavior might have been seen as unpreparedness by others, She began to suspect that it was something much deeper, a conscious choice to play the long game. The longer the case went on, the more she noticed something unsettling. Michael Jordan wasn't reacting like anyone she had seen before. He wasn't rattled by Magnatech's overwhelming evidence, their expert witnesses, or even her own pointed remarks. The witnesses for Magnatech were formidable, people who had worked tirelessly to develop the battery technology, their testimony filled with facts and technical jargon that painted a very clear picture. The timeline of events seemed irrefutable. Jordan's company, according to Magnatech's case, had stolen their design, and all signs pointed toward Jordan's company as the culprit. It was a case that should have left any defendant scrambling to defend themselves, but not Michael Jordan. He sat with a quiet intensity, absorbing each piece of evidence, each word spoken by Magnatech's team, without the slightest hint of panic or stress. His eyes, sharp as ever, were constantly scanning, taking in the details others might have missed. His facial expression remained impassive, even as the key elements of Magnatech's case seemed to be tightening around him. But beneath that calm exterior was a mind working at full capacity. Jordan wasn't just waiting to respond to the accusations. He was silently analyzing the weaknesses in the case. He wasn't going to fight each piece of evidence individually. Instead, he was waiting for a critical moment when it all fell into place. For Judge Thornwald, who was used to the high drama of courtrooms filled with emotional outbursts and quick reactions, Jordan's stillness was a puzzle. It didn't fit into the narrative she had crafted for this trial. This wasn't the behavior of a man caught off guard, trying to salvage his reputation. It wasn't even the behavior of a man facing the consequences of his actions. It was the behavior of someone who had already made up his mind. Someone who was quietly and methodically setting the stage for a much larger play. Despite her growing suspicion, Thornwald couldn't quite grasp the full picture. She assumed it was just the behavior of someone who thought they could get by on charisma and reputation alone. But what she didn't realize was that Jordan wasn't playing by the rules she had come to expect. Where other defendants would have rushed to discredit witnesses, to challenge evidence, Jordan was holding back. He was patiently letting Magnatech set the stage for him, carefully monitoring every word spoken and every move made. At one point, as a crucial part of Magnatech's argument was presented, Jordan's gaze seemed to drift to an innocuous corner of the courtroom. To anyone else, it would have seemed like a lapse in attention. But to someone with the foresight that Jordan had, it was a moment of calculation, a quiet acknowledgement of how this trial was unfolding, and more importantly, how it would ultimately play out. Jordan wasn't distracted. He was preparing. His stillness in the face of such mounting evidence was a deliberate decision, and it was one that began to unsettle Judge Thornwald. What was he thinking? Why wasn't he reacting? It wasn't arrogance, it was something deeper. He was the eye of the storm, unaffected by the chaos swirling around him, holding steady for a reason that would soon be revealed. By now, Judge Thornwald was beginning to feel the weight of her own assumptions. She had written Jordan off as someone who didn't understand the complexities of legal procedures, someone who was so used to winning in other arenas that he thought he could just wing it here. But as the trial continued, she began to wonder if she had misjudged him entirely. Michael Jordan's calm demeanor was not the result of naivety. It was the result of a quiet genius, a genius that up until now had gone unnoticed. The court's laughter at his expense, once a constant undercurrent, began to feel more like a distant memory. As the day drew to a close, Judge Thornwald couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play. She had seen countless defendants falter under pressure, but Jordan's silence didn't seem like a sign of weakness. Instead, it felt like the prelude to something much bigger, something that would soon unfold in a way no one in the courtroom would expect. The calm was, indeed, just the beginning, and soon the storm would hit with a force that no one could have predicted. The trap is set, a strategy hidden beneath the surface. As the days of the trial dragged on, the pattern became clear. Michael Jordan's approach to the courtroom was something entirely unique. While Magnatech's legal team continued to press their case with methodical precision, Jordan seemed to remain almost unaffected by the barrage of evidence piling up against him. He was, in the eyes of many, a man out of his depth, a businessman who had never been in a court of law, facing the formidable team of lawyers from Magnatech. Yet the more the trial progressed, the more it became evident that Jordan was anything but out of his depth. What Judge Thornwald and the rest of the courtroom failed to realize was that Jordan wasn't fumbling through his papers out of panic or unpreparedness. He was playing a deeper game, one that was unfolding carefully, piece by piece. What appeared to be an unorganized mess on his part was, in fact, a complex trap. Every word he spoke, every moment of silence, was part of a larger plan that was about to unfold. He wasn't trying to outmaneuver his opponents with flashy displays of legal knowledge or rapid-fire objections. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Behind his seemingly confused demeanor and his occasional moments of fumbling with paperwork, Jordan was quietly setting the stage for his counterattack. He had already anticipated Magnatech's arguments and had been meticulously planning his moves. It was a strategy that, at first, seemed disjointed, but as the trial continued, the pieces of his defense began to come together in a way that no one in the courtroom expected. Jordan's confidence, which had once been perceived as arrogance, was now beginning to look more like patience. Judge Thornwald, who had dismissed him as a wealthy man playing at law, began to realize that there was more to him than met the eye. He wasn't just biding his time in the courtroom for the sake of pride. He was waiting for Magnatech's lawyers to overreach, for their confidence to blind them to the possibility that they were being led into a trap. And in those moments of quiet, Jordan was carefully observing everything: the witnesses, the evidence, the small gaps in Magnatech's case. He had seen it all before, not in the courtrooms but on the basketball courts, where he had learned to read his opponents like an open book. It was that same ability to study, to notice the subtle details others missed, that he was now bringing to this battle. The courtroom was his new arena, and he was playing it with the same meticulous strategy that had made him a legend in sports. He knew that if he played his cards right, he would have his moment. He wasn't going to respond in real time to every bit of evidence Magnatech presented, as some might have expected. No, he would wait. He would let them build their case, let them believe they had the upper hand. Only then would he reveal his cards. The strategy began to take shape in the most subtle of ways. Judge Thornwald, who had spent years dissecting legal arguments, started to notice the small details that didn't add up. Something about Jordan's behavior had shifted. Where once there had been confusion, now there was focus. Where there had been passivity, now there was calculation. He wasn't simply sitting back. He was waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Even the seemingly trivial moments started to stand out. At one point, Jordan had noticed a slight error in the timeline presented by Magnatech's expert witnesses, an inconsistency that, if pointed out, could completely undermine their argument. But Jordan remained silent, letting them continue to build their case, oblivious to the flaw they had just exposed. His silence wasn't one of ignorance, it was one of strategy. He knew the exact moment to strike, and he would only make his move when it would have the greatest impact. When it was finally his turn to speak, his questions were short, calculated, and precise. He didn't waste time with grand gestures or emotional appeals. Instead, he took the time to dissect Magnatech's claims with surgical precision. His questions were like arrows aimed directly at the heart of their case, each one piercing through the seemingly airtight evidence that had been presented. The courtroom, which had once laughed at his unpreparedness, was now silent, watching as Jordan expertly dismantled the opposition's case. The trap had been set, and now it was time for Magnatech to realize that they had walked right into it. They had underestimated the quiet billionaire in front of them, had dismissed him as a man out of place in the legal world, and in doing so, they had given him the perfect opportunity to expose the flaws in their case. What had once seemed like fumbling was now revealed as calculated brilliance. Every misstep, every moment of apparent disarray had been part of a larger plan, one that, if executed correctly, would leave Magnatech reeling and Judge Thornwald with a new understanding of Michael Jordan. The trap wasn't just legal, it was psychological, a play on perception. And by the time Jordan revealed his strategy, it was too late for Magnatech to recover. As the trial moved into its next phase, the courtroom began to feel a shift in the air, a realization that the case wasn't as straightforward as it had seemed. Magnatech had thought they were on the verge of victory, but Jordan had been waiting. He had been letting them dig their own grave. And now the trap was set, and it was only a matter of time before they walked right into it. The final act. A legal genius unveiled. When patience meets precision. As the trial drew closer to its climax, the courtroom buzzed with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. Magnatech's case appeared to be a juggernaut, a steamroller that had plowed through every obstacle with seemingly perfect precision. The evidence was damning, the witnesses were convincing, and the timeline seemed airtight. Every move Jordan had made up until now had been seen as a miscalculation, a display of naivety or hubris, but the true genius of his strategy was just beginning to unfold. Judge Thornwald, who had watched with skepticism as Michael Jordan fumbled through his defense, now found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about this case. What had once seemed like a farce had slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned into something far more sophisticated. The quiet billionaire who had been written off as an amateur was not only holding his ground, he was shaping the course of the trial with an invisible hand. As Magnatech's attorney, Dominic Reeves, wrapped up his closing arguments, presenting the final pieces of their case, Judge Thornwald couldn't help but notice something strange about the way Jordan was watching him. He wasn't fidgeting or shifting in his seat, as most defendants would under the strain of closing statements. No, Jordan was sitting back, arms crossed, and his eyes locked onto Reeves with a look that felt almost predatory. A quiet intensity that conveyed a chilling confidence. It was as if he had already won, and the only thing left to do was let his opponents finish speaking. The courtroom had become a stage, and Michael Jordan was about to take center stage for the final act. When it came time for Jordan to make his closing remarks, the atmosphere shifted. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward him. Unlike the other moments in the trial, there were no messy papers this time. There was no fumbling with notes, no disorganized stacks. Jordan stood, straightening his suit, his presence suddenly commanding the room. He didn't need to rush or make grand gestures. He simply began to speak in his calm, measured voice. "The evidence is clear," Jordan began. "Magnatech claims they developed the technology first. They've presented all the necessary paperwork, they've shown their patents, and they've even brought witnesses who swear by the validity of their claims. But the truth isn't in their documents. It's in the details. You see, this isn't just about a design or a patent. This is about who had access to the innovation first." His words hung in the air, and Judge Thornwald's attention was immediately piqued. This wasn't the fumbling businessman she had seen earlier. This was someone who had carefully studied every aspect of the case, who had calculated the exact moment when his silence would no longer be a weakness, but a weapon. Jordan continued, each sentence more precise than the last. He didn't need to rely on grandiose legal jargon or technicalities. Instead, he used simple, direct language to expose the core flaw in Magnatech's case. Their timeline was off. He laid out step by step how the evidence presented by Magnatech didn't match the sequence of events that had taken place months earlier. He connected dots no one had bothered to connect, revealing inconsistencies that even Judge Thornwald had missed in her own analysis of the case. "You see," Jordan said, his voice unwavering, "Magnatech didn't just steal from us. They stole from a future that was already in the making, one that we were working on long before they ever filed their patent. The design, the technology, the idea, it wasn't theirs to take. In that moment, it wasn't just the facts that had changed, it was the entire perception of the case. What had seemed like a simple patent dispute was now exposed as a far more complex situation. Jordan's quiet brilliance, which had been hidden beneath layers of disorganization and apparent indecision, had emerged with stunning clarity. Judge Thornwald, who had spent the entire trial trying to dismiss Jordan's approach, now found herself rethinking everything. This wasn't the courtroom blunder she had once thought it was. This was a carefully orchestrated strategy, one that had been unfolding quietly in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Jordan wasn't just challenging Magnatech's case, he was turning it upside down. The trap had been set, and now the courtroom could see the intricate web that had been carefully spun over the course of the trial. Every misstep, every moment of apparent weakness, had been a deliberate act in a much larger play. Jordan's patience was no longer a question of indifference. It was a demonstration of his profound understanding of the game. The final act wasn't just a defense, it was an unveiling of his genius, a moment that exposed the true nature of the battle they had been fighting all along. Magnatech, who had believed they had all the pieces in place, now found themselves on the defensive. The very evidence that had once seemed so irrefutable now appeared shaky. The witnesses who had confidently testified on their behalf suddenly seemed less reliable. The airtight case they had built was starting to unravel, thread by thread. Thread by thread, the courtroom, once filled with smug confidence on Magnatech's part, now held a heavy silence. No one, especially Judge Thornwald, could ignore the impact of Jordan's argument. She had misjudged him, underestimating the quiet billionaire who had been playing the game at a level no one else had understood. When Judge Thornwald adjourned the trial for the day, she knew the decision she was about to make would not be easy. For the first time since the trial had begun, she was unsure of the outcome. The case had turned on its head, and Michael Jordan's strategy had done what no one had expected. He had outsmarted Magnatech, turned their own strengths against them, and proven that patience, precision, and insight could be just as powerful as any legal team. Jordan had taken the courtroom by storm, not with flashy tactics, but with the subtle brilliance of a master strategist. And now, as the gavel was raised to end the day's proceedings, it was clear this legal battle was far from over. What had started as an embarrassing spectacle was about to become a textbook example of legal genius. Lessons learned: the power of patience, strategy, and belief in yourself. Reflecting on Michael Jordan's remarkable journey through the courtroom, we learn several powerful lessons that extend beyond just legal battles and can apply to various aspects of life. One of the most significant takeaways is the importance of patience. In a world where we often expect immediate results, Jordan's ability to remain calm and composed in the face of overwhelming odds teaches us that sometimes silence and patience are more powerful than rushing into action. It's not about immediate responses. Rather, it's about waiting for the right moment to make your move. Another important lesson is confidence without arrogance. Jordan's quiet confidence throughout the trial shows that belief in yourself doesn't need to be loud or boastful. True confidence is about knowing your strengths, understanding your strategy, and trusting the process, no matter how things may appear to others. His approach teaches us that confidence comes from within and doesn't require external validation. We are also reminded that it's crucial to think beyond the surface. Just as Jordan's seemingly disorganized defense was, in reality, a well-thought-out strategy, things aren't always as they seem. Sometimes it's the quiet, subtle moves that have the greatest impact. Whether in business, sports, or personal life, it's important to look deeper, recognize the hidden layers of any situation, and trust that careful planning often brings the best results. Jordan's ability to anticipate the unexpected and turn it in his favor highlights the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. Life, much like a courtroom, is filled with unpredictable challenges, and Jordan's foresight and preparation helped him stay one step ahead. His strategy teaches us that even in the face of uncertainty, preparation is key to finding success, no matter how daunting the challenges may seem. Lastly, the trial serves as a powerful reminder that we should never underestimate ourselves. No matter how others perceive us, whether they think we're unprepared, overconfident, or out of our element, believing in our own abilities is what truly matters. Jordan's ability to thrive despite being underestimated by others encourages us to trust our instincts and recognize that the strength to overcome challenges often lies within ourselves. If you've enjoyed this story of Michael Jordan's incredible legal strategy and the lessons it brings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories that blend real-world lessons with powerful narratives. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the trial and how you think Jordan's strategy applies to your own life. Drop a comment below, whether you have questions, insights, or personal experiences you'd like to share. Let's start a conversation about the power of patience, strategy, and believing in yourself. Hit the subscribe button and join the conversation.